You can be seated. Children, you can be dismissed. First of all, I'd like to say happy birthday to my mom. So would you give her a hand this morning? My mom and dad came over here to the church with me just a couple of months after, or a month after that I came over. And I have been here ever since. It's such a blessing to this season of my life to have their support, and they're all in. And thank you to all those who serve at this church, from breakfast to sound to screens to the band, men's meeting, everything that you do. Thank you for that. It doesn't go unnoticed, and you're the reason that this place is able to be great and to serve greatly is because you love the Lord and you continue to serve Him. So thank you for that. Last week we started this series called The Restorers, and it's the keeper of the hammer and the sword. And we talked about last week how broken people will do bold things and how we need to be broken people, broken about the condition of people outside of here. And I told you how if we could understand the impact that it will have on people who go to hell, it would make us want to witness all the stronger. If we could understand the realities of eternity and the weight of eternity, it would make us choose to share Him more, and it would make us choose to be serious about our relationship with Him. I think that this story, as we talk about it, is talking about restoring the broken places. But today what we're also talking about is sometimes in order to restore the broken places, you have to run out the troublemakers. And that's what Nehemiah found himself in. He had to run out the troublemakers so he could build up protection for the people and so that he could unite the home front. There's people that want to come inside, even the churches today, and they want to act like they're there for the right reasons, but they're really there just to devise the people. They're there really just to cause trouble, and they're not being used by the Holy Spirit of God. They're being used by something else. And sometimes I think you have to, if you're not going to join what's going on, I think sometimes it is best for people to move along. And I'm praying for those people, and I want them to do well, but at the same time, this is not going to be a place of division. It's going to be a place that's united. So I told you last week that Nehemiah, he was the cupbearer to the king of Babylon. And while the Jewish people were exiled into Babylon, and they asked he asked someone who had come from Judea about his people. He's very broken for the state of his people. So broken that it caused him to do something about it. And I think that's the difference in really broken and just a little sad. I think brokenness drives you to respond because he began praying, and when the king approached him and asked him why he was sad in his presence, he poured out his heart to the king. And the king, if you didn't know anything about a kingdom, if you're sad in front of the king, he really a lot of times would just kill you. But instead, he offered help to Nehemiah. And in a miraculous show of the gracious hand of God, the king finances the rebuilding of the walls of Jerusalem, and walls that he had previously torn down, or walls that had been previously torn down by his kingdom. And I told you how Nehemiah left the citadel of Susa, and he traveled back to Jerusalem. And then before he met with anyone, he did what? He says he got on and he surveyed the condition of the walls. He wanted to see and it's interesting if you know anything about walls. Normally when you have walls and you have people on the walls and they know everything that's going on around the city. Why? In case anyone invades. But if you read Nehemiah, when he's surveying the walls at the beginning of chapter 2, he's going around and it says, well, I went in by this place and I entered in, and then I entered back out through this part of the wall that was torn down. And he's just basically going in and out of the walls. So that just tells you the condition that the city's in, because this protection that they've had in the walls is completely torn down. So that means anybody can come in and anybody can go out. Anybody can come in and anybody can go. That's not protection at all. That would be like me saying you're living in a really bad neighborhood, the crime's really high, but I'm not going to give you any doors to your house. I'm not going to give you any locks for the doors. It's not very smart, but that's exactly how they're living. And so this is where I left us last week in Nehemiah chapter 2. So these officials did not know where I had gone or what I was doing. So this was right after Nehemiah's surveying the walls. And he says, because as yet I had said nothing to the Jews or the priests or nobles or officials or any others who would be doing the work. And then I said, you see the trouble we're in? He's asking the people who live in the broken down city, hey, do you see the trouble we're in? Because evidently they don't, because they haven't rebuilt the walls. But he says it. He says, you see the trouble we're in? Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been burned with fire. And then he says, come, let us rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, and we will no longer be in disgrace. Look at this, though. This just really speaks to the condition of the people. Nehemiah is having to say, do you see the trouble we're in? You're living in tents. You don't have an economy because you can't have an economy in a town that doesn't have walls to protect it, because anybody can come in and take it. You're not even sure that the people around you are not enemies, if it's friend or foe, because you're letting everybody in. But you don't see it, and you're as close to it as anybody. And he says, come, let us rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, and we'll no longer be in disgrace. And I also told them about the gracious hand of my God. And I told you last week, that will be the distinguishing factor, the gracious hand of God. And what the king had said to me, and they replied, let us start building. So they began this good work. All right, so we're going to read a little bit further, because I want to show you now what's happening is that the people have started to work. And you're going to have to follow with me in Scripture this morning. I don't know if there's a rule, but sometimes it seems like we're not supposed to share too many Scripture, but I really feel like that's kind of what we're here to do. All right, Nehemiah chapter 3. Eliashib, the high priest, and his fellow priests went to work and rebuilt the sheep gate. They dedicated it and set its doors in place, building as far as the Tower of the 100, which they dedicated, and as far as the Tower of Hananel. The men of Jericho built the adjoining section, and Zachar, son of Imri, built next to them. The fish gate was rebuilt by the sons of Hanas, okay, Drew, you want to give me any help on that word? And they laid its beams and put its doors and bolts and bars in place. Meremoth, son of Uriah, the son of Hakaz, repaired the next section. Next to him, Meshullam, son of Barakah, the son of Meshabel, made repairs, and said next to Zadok, son of Bana, also made repairs. The next section was repaired by the men of Tekoa, but their nobles would not put their shoulders to work under their supervisors. The Jeshanah gate was repaired by the Jodah and son of Paseah, and Meshullam, son of Besodai. They laid its beams and put its doors with their bolts and bars in place. Hey, I'll just go ahead and tell you, if you know the proper pronunciation of these words, get with me after service and we'll go. All right. Next to them, repairs were made by the men from Gibeon to Mizpah, Melashah of Gibeah, and Jadon of Meronoth, places under the authority of the governor of the Trans-Euphrates. Uzziel, son of Haraham, one of the goldsmiths, repaired the next section, and Hanai, one of the perfumers, makers, made repairs next to them, and they restored Jerusalem as far as the broad wall. And Rephi, son of Hur, ruler of half the district of Jerusalem, repaired the next section, adjoining the Jedidiah, son of these are hard words. Made repairs opposite to his house, and Hessa and Habonai made repairs next to him, next to the Hall of Heroes. Makajah of Haram and Hashab of Pathka of Moab repaired another section in the Tower of Ovens. And they just keep going. I'm getting wore out. The valley gate was repaired by Hanan and the residents of Noah. They rebuilt it and put its doors with their bolts and bars in place. And they also repaired 1,000 cubits of walls as far as the dung gate. The dung gate was repaired by Malchijah, son of Rekah, ruler of the district of Beth Hakerem. And he rebuilt it and put its doors with their bolts and bars in place. I'm almost done here. The fountain gate was repaired by Shallum, son of Kohazah, ruler of the district of Misra, and he rebuilt it, roofing it over and putting its doors and bolts and bars in place. He also repaired the wall of the pool of Siloam by the king's garden as far as the steps going down from the city of David. Beyond him, Nehemiah, son of Azbuk, ruler of the half district of Bethzer, made repairs up to the point opposite the tombs of David as far as the artificial pool and the house. And so what you're seeing is they've gone to work. He's taking the people who wasn't doing anything, and all of a sudden everybody's working. And I told you last week, when you have a team that has a losing mentality, it takes a special person to rally that team and to get them from thinking that they're losing to get them to thinking that they're winning and that we can do it. And with us, we can. We're not overwhelmed. Everybody's resources are not more than ours, but we can do this. And so that's what they've started doing. They started building the sections of the wall. Because of one man's brokenness, It's led him to do bold things. And now he is leading people to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. And how's he doing it? Teamwork. It's like, how do you eat an elephant? You eat it one bite at a time, right? You just take a little section at a time. That's what's happening here. The people have divided up, and they've divided up the task, and together they're completing it. Teamwork, what it does is it accomplishes what individuals can't. Some of you, if you would look at your marriage as teamwork and not two individuals, you would find that everything works a lot better. The problem is when you've got one individual doing one thing and one individual doing another, and they're doing this. And you know what the factor that's supposed to pull them together is? Christ. And then as you draw close to Him, you'll draw close to each other. And that's the key. They got teamwork. It's going to be deciding to do this together. They couldn't do it before. It was impossible. 150 years, the walls have been broken. And now they're going to go together. John Maxwell said this. He said, teamwork makes the dream work. I know it's simple, but it's true. There's nothing here at this church that couldn't be done if people didn't come together. But because they do, and we all come together under the banner of Christ, we're able to do something that we wouldn't be able to do. See, there's no I in team. There's no I in team. That's the problem many times is one person makes it about them, and that selfishness destroys the productivity of the team. But here in chapter 3, everyone is contributing to the cause. Now, this is what I want you to see about this. Everyone didn't do the same amount of work, but everybody did do something. Look, verse 10. Jedediah, son of Haram, made repairs opposite his house. He said, well, what can I do? Well, I can repair the wall across from my house. So he starts working on it, and he gets it built back. And then Micaiah, one of the goldsmiths, he made repairs as far as the house of the temple servants and the merchants opposite the inspection gate and as far as the room above the corner. And between the room above the corner and the sheep gate, the goldsmiths and merchants made repairs. He's part of this whole thing, and they've repaired this long section of the wall. But this guy in verse 10 just repairs what's across from his house. But guess what? When they came together, they accomplished a lot. It's not the same work. They didn't do the same thing. It wasn't like they said, okay, you've got to repair 20 foot of wall. No, they said, you do what you can. And in the church right now, we need people. We don't need everybody to do the same thing. Everybody can't do my job. I can't do y'all's job. But what we can do is we can do what we can adequately. For some of us, it would start with attendance. You can be here. When you're here, then guess what? Things happen. When I used to lead Elevation Ministry, and I've told you this before, but some of you probably haven't heard it. When I was leading that ministry, people say, well, how do you choose your help? How do you choose who does what? How do you choose? I said, I just turn around, and whoever's there, that's who I choose. But you can't turn around and choose those who aren't there. See, in this church, sometimes people ask me, they say, well, how do you know who's going to do what? Sometimes we just turn around. And it's like, hey, we need this. While you're here, do you want to serve? Sure. Go to work. The people that do the breakfast, they come to me and they say, hey, we want to do the breakfast. I got a vision. I said, I don't know. I don't know if it'll work. I don't know if it won't work. But you know what? We'll give it a try. If that's what you feel like you're supposed to be led to do. Guess what? It does great now. Probably 100 people every Sunday come in there and they eat and they spend time with one another and they fellowship. Why? Because you turn around and there was somebody there. See, we don't do the same work. I don't make the breakfast. Thank goodness. I'm doing a good enough job trying to pronounce these words this morning. But you know what? We can adequately serve together. See, everyone can't do everything, but everyone can do something. We're all at different places in life, too. What I used to bring to the church when I was 20 is not what I bring in my 40s. I could work just tirelessly at the church, putting things together, work. I could teach a class, go to another thing, go do another thing. I just worked tirelessly all the time at a bunch of things. Whatever needed to be done, that was kind of my job. It's like, hey, can you do this? Sure. Can you do this? Sure. Can you do this? Sure. I don't remember hardly ever saying no to anything. It's like, whatever. I'll just do whatever. Now, I'll give you a little insight into my life over the last few days. It's been interesting at the Martin house. So, Thursday night, Elijah's supposed to be getting ready to go to Deeper. Right before bed, he says, hey, I don't feel too great. Took a little medicine. Friday morning, he wakes up with, I guess he's got the flu. Something like that. They say it's not the flu, but it looks like the flu. So he's been really sick the last few days. He felt like death. Well, Tuesday, April called me at work, and she said, hey, the shower head broke off. I'm like, broke off? She's like, yeah, it broke off. I was moving it, just broke, laser beam, to the body. So I said, okay, well, I go get a shower head. that was Tuesday. Thursday, she said, hey, the guys that are working on, we're doing a little job in our garage, being converted into a new living area. It's really nice. And she said, those guys were into the house, and they saw a little bit of water. They think something's leaking. So I talked to those guys, and they said, we think the wax ring on your toilet may be leaking a little or whatever. Well, April's toilet's not been working well in that bathroom for a little while. It's about 18 years old. So what I did when I got home, I decided I would change it out. So I started taking it apart. As soon as I took the water off from the cutoff, I realized the cutoff was still leaking, if you know anything about that. And so I was like, well, I'm going to have to replace the cutoff. And so off to Lowe's I go, 20 minutes. I get the stuff, new toilet, all the kit, everything together in the cutoff. Look, I bought, if you know anything about this, I know some of you are not going to know what a shark bite is. You basically just push it on there and it works. I thought this will be great for the cutoff. So I get it home and I go to push it on and it feels real loose. Well, I panic and I go, well, I didn't get the right thing. So I'd go back to Lowe's, 20 more minutes. And then while I'm at Lowe's, I'm in there and I'm like, I need to call Cadre and ask him. Because Cadre, if you don't know, he was a plumber. He's actually the one who plumbed my house 20 years ago. So I'm like, I need to talk to him because evidently I'm not buying the right thing. Well, I go to my car and get my phone and realize that he had already called me about something else. So I call him. And he says, hey. And I start telling him, he says, what kind of pipe is this? And he says, long story short, he basically gets down to, hey, you may not have pushed it on there hard enough. Home I go, get the same one that I just push it on there, get it on there just a little bit harder. It's perfectly well, install the toilet in 20 minutes. Something that had taken 3 hours up to this point for me to get all the pieces together. And I text Cater and I said, all it was I needed to push on there. And he said, that's what they do. They pay me for my knowledge. And I thought, you know what? We're all in different places in life. Cadre installed my toilet the first time. This time I installed it. And this time all he had to do was instruct me to push the thing a little further along. I won't tell you how yesterday morning I woke up and the other toilet was broken. I replaced it yesterday. But it didn't take long. And so now I have 2 brand new toilets for anybody that comes to Life Group at my house. But the thing about it is that we're all at different places. We're all at different places. And we're all can still serve in different ways. Trust me, I don't want to do any more teen lock-ins, but there was a point in my life where I did them. I don't want to go any more youth trips. I'm glad I'm not the youth pastor. When the children leave, I'm glad I don't do children's ministry. I'm very, I'm good with my 2, but that's about it. I'm taxed out. But everybody can do something. And Nehemiah had lots of people that just got to work. Maybe one guy was faster than the others. Maybe that's why he finished more of the wall than the other guy who just finished a portion in front of his house. Maybe the guy that finished the portion of his house had to ask a lot of people how to do this. How do I get the rocks to line up right? How do I get the blocks? How can I? Or maybe he was just a little slower. Some built more than others. But it wasn't about the amount of work. Everyone just came together and worked where they could. And in time, what happens when that goes on is impossible things become possible. Because all of a sudden, Nehemiah's getting portions of the wall that are built that hadn't been built in hundreds of years. And there's people there the whole time that could have done it if they would have just come together and got to work. And it makes me want, I don't want to get to the end of this life and realize, hey, there was more I could have done if I could have just rallied the people to go after it, to get after it, to tell people about the Lord. A lot of times, the only hindrances on us are on ourselves. We put them on us. The only shackles we wear are the ones that we clipped on. Now, so they come together and they build the walls. But let me show you what happens, because anytime you build, anytime there's progression, there's always going to be opposition. Always going to be opposition. Doesn't matter what you're doing. It actually starts in Nehemiah chapter 2, but it repeats itself throughout the entire story. I can't flip that one. Maybe you guys can. There it goes. Oh. I'm going the wrong way. I don't know what's happening here. Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 10. When Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite official heard about this is at the very beginning here. Nehemiah just came into town. They were very much disturbed that someone had come to promote the welfare of the Israelites. This is what I was talking about. When you have broken down walls, people can get in that don't belong there. These are 3 influential men that are inside of Jerusalem. These people have the people's ear. They have free reign in the city at the time that there are no walls to keep them out. So what's happening is the enemy is living amongst them, because Sanballat is a Horonite. A Horonite is a Samaritan leader. So what is a Samaritan doing in Jerusalem? Because these were the half-breed enemies of the Jews. They didn't get along. So why is Sanballat even allowed to have a place at the table to speak on the life of the people? And then the next one, you got Tobiah the Ammonite. And it says that he took over the storerooms in the temple for his own use. And he's good friends with Sanballat. You want to find one scoundrel, find another one. You know, it's like they just team up and partner together. And then the next one is Geshem the Arab. Okay, hold on. So I got a Samaritan that's living here. And now an Arab? What is an Arab doing with the Jewish people? He doesn't have the same gods. He's allies with the enemies of Nehemiah. See, when you don't have walls, anyone can come in. And the enemies of the Jews had seats of authority in the kingdom that they had no right in. You can't allow the naysayers to have a place at your table of influence. There's people that can't come into my house. There's people that don't value what I value. They can come in as a visitor, but they'll quickly probably be dismissed, because I'm going to see that they don't line up with the things that we've got going on in our home. And you can't let those who don't value what you value speak into your life. That's why when we become a Christian, sometimes there has to be a cutting away from old influences in our life. There's people that's been in your life before that don't affect you in good, positive ways. There's negative people that if you put in a dark room, they'll develop. I'm talking about those kind of negative people. And you got to cut them from your life. And as soon as Nehemiah in chapter 2 gets the backing of the people to start building the walls, this is what occurs. Look, this is just a little further in chapter 2, verse 19. When Sanballat, man, there's that guy again, Tobiah the Ammonite official, and Geshem the Arab heard about it, they mocked and ridiculed us. What are they doing? They ask. Are you rebelling against the king? Why is it always the same few people? And what's bad is the same few people will say, well, I've heard people saying. Well, get on and go listen to them. I'm not studying what I'm hearing people saying. No, what it is that you and your 2 buddies over here are talking about us and trying to deter us from building something that's going to profit this kingdom when you've been living off of our ridicule. Sometimes you got to run them out. Opposition from enemies they have that they've let eat at their table. Hands that broke bread with them have been there, and they keep beating them down. So-called friends who aren't there for their success, but only to manipulate them for their own gain. And this is what I see. When opposition comes, you have to focus on the goal and not lend your ear, your time, or your emotion to the distraction. Nehemiah's there to build the wall. He's not there to deal with the complaints of Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem. Nehemiah's already got a call from the Lord. He's already got the backing of the king. It doesn't matter what Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem think about it. They can go kick dirt somewhere. You know what I'm saying? It's not important. They're not important. Get away from here. You're not for what we're for. All you want to do is you want to manipulate our people. You want to try to scare our people. You want to try to run them away. But I'm saying, hey, I'm here to rebuild the wall. We're here to rebuild the wall. Just think about rebuilding the wall. Everyone will not go to the next place. Everyone will not support the bold idea. Sometimes people will let their own fear cause them to drag you along with them. And they will try to hold you down and hold the plan back because they don't see the benefit in moving forward. I see this a lot in times where people feel like the Lord's telling them to do something, and you can see the hand of the Lord on them, and then all of a sudden somebody who doesn't have as big a faith will come along and they'll say, oh. When I was 11 years old, I was going to Edgewood Church. It's where my wife's dad is the pastor. And we were at a place where I think we had about 100 people, and it was just big, and it was on Railroad Street, and it was busting the seams a little bit for us in there. And they were starting to figure out how they were going to go to the next level. Like how are we going to build a new building? What are we going to do? This was before they moved up on the hill there past Kmart. And so they're doing that. Well, then all of a sudden, they had planned to build. Well, all of a sudden, something comes up and available, and it was Harvest Temple at the time. It was up on that hill in Anniston. It was more than what they could afford, but because Harvest was going to move some things around, it was going to be able for them to do it. But the thing in that church is that when you moved anywhere, you had to have a vote. I don't value voting congregational wide on every move that you make. Where are we going? We're going to pay the power bill? Let's vote on it. No, let's just pay the power bill. So I remember that there was a guy in the church at the time, and my parents are probably wondering who the guy is, but it's somebody that's from a long time ago. But I remember this guy, and I thought a lot of him. Even as an 11-year-old, I thought a lot of him. And I remember sitting in that meeting, it was like this, and you let everybody kind of talk, and he stood up and he was like, I don't think we should do this. I don't think we can afford it. I don't think we should go. I'm not for it. And you know what? They voted, and I think maybe like only 2 people voted against it, and he was one of the 2. And I remember I was shocked that he was in opposition and that he didn't have the faith to move forward. That church today has 450 to 500 people. That church has been super successful for all the time since then, the 30 years or whatever it's been that I've been part of it. It's been super successful. And you know what? There was one guy who said, hey, I don't think we can do it, and I don't think we can go on. See, there's always a Sanballat, a Tobiah, and a Geshem hiding out in the mix. I don't think that the guy meant terrible on all those people. I don't think that he was trying to tear it down. I just don't think that he had the faith to go to the next level. And sometimes you got to go, well, I can't. And that's the best place that you can be in, because when you say you can't, that means that God will. See, when the church caught fire and it was gutted here, and our pre-existing sanctuary was where we have breakfast now, and we began meeting with Faith Temple. And during that time, I told everyone that we were going to take our time, because if we built back just like we were before the fire, then there wouldn't be any money or any room for us to have expansion. We knew that over there we had 140 seats, maxed out 110%. And we had been that way for 3 years, and we didn't have enough money to build. And so when the fire happened over there, we were completely paid off here, plus we had some insurance money. And so I said, before we start building, let's make sure that, let's see if we can expand so that we have more room when we get back. And I remember one Wednesday night I was talking to a man that went to church here, and he was talking to me about how we needed to just fix back what we had and get back into our church just as quick as we possibly could. And he was just like this the whole time. He was like, we just need to get back. We need to get back in there, and we don't need to stay a long time over here. We spent a year with Faith Temple. We stayed with them not through just our fire. We stayed with them through their fire. I'll tell you this. This is the honest truth. There was a man who was affiliated with here that was telling people that I had set the fires. I guess we have one fire, and then the next place that you go to catches fire. And he was telling people that I was setting the fires, and I needed to be investigated. And literally, the night the Faith Temple caught on fire, I was sitting next to Brett, who's a policeman, on my couch. But what I'm saying is, this guy was like, hey, we just need to build back what we got. And I was like, hey, hold on just a minute. Let's have faith in where we're going to go next. Because if we settle for what we once had, all we're going to have is today over half of you wouldn't be here because there wouldn't have been any room for you. See, and Nehemiah has to keep his eyes going forward. There's no faith required for doing easy things. That you can accomplish without any help of God. Look here, moving on to chapter 4 here. Here it is again. When Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the wall, he became angry and was greatly incensed. He ridiculed the Jews. And in the presence of his associates and in the army of Samaria, he said, what are those feeble Jews doing? Will they restore their wall? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they finish in a day? Can they bring the stones back to life from the heaps of the rubble, burned as they are? Tobiah the Ammonite, who was at his side, said, what are they building? Even a fox climbing on it would break down their walls of stone. And then Nehemiah said, hear us, O God, for we are despised. Turn their insults back on their heads. Give them over as plunder in a land of captivity. Do not cover up their guilt or blot out their sins from your sight, for they have thrown insults into the face of the builders. So we rebuilt the wall till all of it reached half its height, for the people worked with all of their heart. Notice there's opposition, but where there's opposition, there's people of faith that just keep building in the face of opposition. You can't listen to what everybody else is saying. You got to listen to what God's saying. The people who are against you, they start making up all of these random things. He says, so you know what we did? We just kept building. And then the wall reached half its height. Hey, something that hadn't happened in 150 years is now halfway complete, and we're only maybe like 3 weeks into the process here. But when Sanballat, Tobiah, and the Ammonites, and the people of Ashdod heard the repairs to Jerusalem walls had gone ahead and the gaps were being closed, they were very angry. You know why? Because they were very afraid. What would this mean if Jerusalem got its walls back? If they established their city back, guess what? They would start running out the trouble. So they all plotted together to come against and fight against Jerusalem and stir up trouble against it. But we prayed to our God and posted a guard day and night to meet this threat. Meanwhile, the people in Judah said, the strength of the laborers is giving out, and there is much rubble that we cannot rebuild the wall. See, the people are starting to get worried. Also, our enemies, before they know it or see us, we will be right there among them and will kill them and put an end to their work. So the enemies are coming against us. Then the Jews who lived near them came and told us 10 times, wherever you turn, they will attack us. Therefore, I stationed some of the people behind the lowest points of the wall at the exposed places, posting them by families with their swords, spears, and bows. And after I looked things over, I stood up and said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, do not be afraid. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome, and fight for your families, your sons and your daughters, your wives, and your homes. When our enemies heard that we were aware of their plot, and that God had frustrated, we all returned to the wall, each to our own work. And from that day on, half of my men did the work, while the other half were equipped with spears, shields, bows, and armor. The other posted themselves behind all the people of Judah, and who were building the wall. And those who carried materials did their work with one hand and held the weapon with the other, and each of the builders wore his sword at the side as he worked. But the man who sounded the trumpet stayed with me. Then I said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, the work is extensive and spread out, and we are widely separated from each other along the wall. Wherever you hear the sound of the trumpet, join us there. Our God will fight for us. So we continued the work with half the men holding the spears from the first light of dawn till the stars came out. And at that time also to said to the people, have every man and his helper stay inside Jerusalem at night, so they can serve us as guards at night and workers by day. Neither I nor my brothers nor my men nor the guards with me took off our clothes, and each had his weapon, even when he went for water. Some translations make that look like even when he went to the bathroom, he had his sword. Let me tell you what happened. He said, okay, the opposition is arising. Guess what? We're going to arise against the opposition. Half of our men are just going to be trained to fight. And guess what? The other men, they're not even going to work with two hands, because they're going to have a sword in one hand and they're going to stack bricks with the other. So now we're working with an even smaller workforce. And guess what happens? They finished the wall in 52 days. 52 days. And half of it, that's when the opposition really got strong. And they said, you know what, the opposition is strong, but God is stronger. But you know what they did? They said, we're going to prepare for the opposition. We got to be prepared for the opposition. It's going to come. So when the opposition comes, the people got to arise and get stronger. So the people get stronger and they arise and they get ready. And what happens is they start building on. Because why? They keep their goal in mind. Opposition grows louder. They start doing anything they can to get into the heads of the Jews. What? Oh, even a fox could knock down this wall. Could these feeble Jews really build back the walls that were in ashes? See, I think you need to pay attention when people start making fun and start trying to stop you from what you're doing. It might just be in that moment that God is wanting to work the greatest in your life. This church was built on faith. We built it with only a little over a third of us that are here now, but we built it with belief that if we created a bigger place, more could come and learn about the Lord. We had some opposition. There's been opposition along the way. There's been times where we were like, is this the right thing? Is this, how do we need to go about this? But you know what? After here burned and then Faith Temple burned, And the opposition, what did it do? I told you, I said it grew louder. There was a guy that was speaking things and saying things that weren't true. It wasn't announced the truth in it yet. This man had no stake here. He had no business here. And so, you know what? He didn't get a voice at the table. So when he started saying, oh, well, the pastor's over there burning things down, we just kept building. We just kept building. Why? Because he doesn't get the focus. Because if he would have got the focus, then guess what? We wouldn't be here this morning. We wouldn't be seeing what God's doing. We wouldn't see people set free. We wouldn't have the chance to pray for Tim and several of you others this morning. We wouldn't have that opportunity if we didn't keep the goal in mind, and that's to grow a bigger house for the Lord. Anytime you go after the Lord and the Lord's plan, guess what? Opposition is going to arise. And what I learned from Nehemiah is when opposition arises, you need to just adjust and keep building. You don't need to let the enemy determine your destination. Well, I was scared. Well, I was afraid. So I hid. So I did this. The enemy doesn't have that right to speak at your table. Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem didn't have a right to speak for the Jews. The outsiders of your life don't have the right to speak about you either, because God has a plan for your life and for your family. But you have to quit letting someone outside stop you from doing what you know is right. You got to keep building. Keep building your family for Christ. Smile through adversity. Stack the blocks and hold the sword in the other hand. For us, you know what the sword is? It's the Word of God. I'm just going to keep working, and I'm going to keep holding on to this. I'm going to keep believing that what He started is good, and He'll finish the work to completion. And then we're going to keep pressing on for the kingdom of Christ, even if opposition should arise. Because you know what? When you're doing the right thing, I would hope that it does get hell's attention. Hell's kingdom should want to stop what we're doing. And when it doesn't, you got to wonder what side you're siding with. If opposition doesn't come, are you even doing anything that's a threat to hell? We can settle for less, or we can't settle for less than what the Lord has for us just because we're afraid of what might come against us if we move forward. That's what faith does in our life. It says, I don't know who, or I don't know how, but I do know the who. And the who is all that matters, and His name is Jesus Christ. So you say, well, Pastor, it's really tough right now. How will I get through this? Well, it'll be Jesus that you get through this. You say, well, how will I defeat addiction in my life? It plagues me. It comes against me. The things that I've got that come against me. Well, Jesus, you got to focus on Him. How will I press on? Well, I'll lean on Jesus. Well, how will I come against opposition? You know what? I'll come against opposition with Jesus. And I know that sounds like this blanket statement that Christianity throws out there, but there's power in the name of Jesus. Because even when I don't see it, He's working. Even when I don't feel it, guess what? He is working then. And Nehemiah and them just continued to build, even though people would come against it. And I'll tell you this morning, people are going to come against you when you try to do the right thing. But that doesn't mean you stop doing it. You know what? When you're trying to do the right thing inside of your marriage, guess what? Something's going to come against that. When you're trying to do the right thing with your family, something's going to come against that. Why? Because the devil doesn't want you to succeed. He wants you to bleed. Worship team, would you come this morning? I'm telling you, opposition is going to come. But you keep laying those bricks and keep believing, because eventually what happens for them is the walls get rebuilt completely. The government gets established. The people get encouraged. And God begins to do things. The walls have to be rebuilt sometime in our life to keep everything else out. And you know, for Nehemiah, the reason the walls were torn down was because Babylon had come in and overtaken them. But for a lot of us, what happens is we've torn down our own walls. We've allowed things inside of our marriage that shouldn't have been in there. We've allowed outside influence to overcome us. You know, we didn't have faith to rebuild when we needed to. We didn't have faith to go forward even though we knew that we needed to. We didn't have faith to cut some things out. So what we did was we took a section of the wall down and we allowed influences to come in by the things that we were allowing to influence us from the outside. when I think the whole message is shore up the walls. Shore up the walls. Let's stand this morning. Are you exposed this morning because of decisions that you've made in your life? How about this? Do you have the faith to go to the next place? Even if you don't know what that looks like right now. You say, well, I know that I've given my life to the Lord, but I don't know what He wants me to do. And I'm a little bit afraid of it, because if I say yes, what if He calls me over here? What if He calls me over there? What if He asks me to do this? Well, what if He does? Guess what? You're going to be the happiest you've ever been, knowing that you're in the will of God. Knowing that there's nothing between you and Him. This morning, the altar's open for people who say, you know what? I understand that there's opposition coming, but I want to lean into the Lord. And I want to know what it's like. And I want to have the faith to move when He says to move. And I want to have the faith to serve, because everybody can do something. Everybody can't do everything, but everybody can do something.